So, do you guys get a lot of scolding by your parents lately? Like, your parents tell you to do everything? Like, do your homework, wash your hands, brush your teeth, eat your vegetables? Like, do you guys hear that all the time? All the time, right? Why? Why does our mom, like, literally tell us, like, everything? Like, did you wash your hand? I did. Wash it again. Why? Right? How about this? Whenever you're running, they tell you don't run, or they tell you don't get up on a high place, don't jump, don't make any stupid acts. You know, they make all these 잔소리, right? We're like, why? I'm all grown up. Hey, I'm 41. I still hear that all the time from my mom. You know, did you eat breakfast today? No. Why not? You should eat breakfast. You know, it gives you power. Mom, I'm 41. Like, literally, I'm 41. She's like, no, you should eat. Like, okay, whatever. Anyway, why do they always do that? Your parents, our parents, your mom, your dad, why do they always do 잔소리 to us? Like, what's their reason for it? Do they have a good reason why they do that? Here's the thing. I talk to my parents sometime, but not sometime, like very rarely, but I ask them, like, mom and dad, as you can tell, I'm all grown up, I'm old enough, and I have married and I have wife, but why are you still giving me all this 잔소리? And they're like, oh, this is for you. What? How? And they're like, this is for us to protect you. You're protecting me. You're like 70-something, I'm 41, and you're trying to protect me. But here's the thing. Whenever they tell us to do something, they have a good reason. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not. And even if we don't want to hear the 잔소리, we have to remember that their scolding, their 잔소리 is for us. They say those things because they love us and they want to protect us. And same thing with the 잔소리, everything that's around us has a purpose of their existence. In other words, everything that God has created, there's a reason why such things exist. Even though we may not agree with it, even though we may not know their purposes, we have to believe the fact that everything that exists, everything that's out there, there's a reason why, they have a purpose for them. So, I have a thing. Everything has a purpose. So here's the thing. You see that red part of the plug? Do you guys know what that is for? By the way, that's American style plug, okay? So that pointy part with the red circle, do you guys know why that thing exists? Because if you go to different country, there's only 2 holes, right? In Vietnam, if you go to Korea, if you go to Japan, everywhere in the world, they have 2 holes for every plug, except U.S. And I'm like, U.S. is just terrible. They're a bad country. But anyway, do you know why that thing exists? I didn't know, and I had no idea why, I actually didn't like it. But here's the thing. That thing is actually very necessary whenever the power goes out or whenever your house is struck by lightning. That thing actually stops the electricity coming out from the plugs. In other words, that prevents fire. And that prevents electric shock. So that actually saved a lot of lives. Did you know? I didn't know either until a couple days ago, really. So as you can tell, such thing like that, everything that is out there or around us that we don't know the purpose for, they actually have a reason why they exist. And whether we like it or not. For some, we may not know why things exist. And for some, we may not know the purpose of their existence. And some, they may seem very useless in one way. But once we know the purpose of their existence, we get to appreciate them and we get to be grateful for them. Just like today's passage. The passage for today is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. 선악과 in Korean, right? So sometimes we wonder why God created that tree, because sin came into us because the tree was there. So today's passage is about God's creation, right? From Genesis chapter 1 until today's passage is about how God created the universe to Adam and Eve. From day 1 to day 6, what did God create? Do you guys know? Do you guys remember the order of creation? What did God create in the first day? Genesis chapter 1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In other words, when there was nothing, when the time didn't even begin, when there was literally nothing out there, God was there and He began to create everything from heavens and the earth and everything that's in heaven and on earth. That's how God created. But here's the thing. What was the last thing that God created? What was the last thing that God created? On day 6, God created everything. He completed His creation. But what was the last creation that God ever made? Do you guys remember? Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. So what did God create on the last day? God created man and woman. And how did God create them? According to His image. I know I have said it many, many times, but because we are created in His image, we are specially and uniquely created. I mean, look at each other for a second. Look at each other for a second. Do we look alike? Thank God, right? I mean, I don't look like the person next to you, right? Right? So you're just like, yeah, I look better than him. Yeah, keep dissing each other, guys. But anyway. When Bible says we are created in His image, that doesn't mean that we look alike. I mean, we do look alike in one sense. We have 2 eyes, 1 nose, and 1 mouth, right? But here's the thing. This image is the characteristic of God. Okay? We feel like God. We think like God. We may not be as perfect as God is, but that's the characteristic that we may have, as we are created in His image. But here's the thing. When God created man and women, He didn't just leave them alone. Okay? Anybody have a pet by any chance? Pet like 개, 고양이, dog, cat, or turtle, fish, or 고슴도치? Does anybody have a pet at home? I know some of you have cats at home, right? So, do you feed your cat? What do you feed him? Pop? So you just feed him rice? No? What happens if you don't feed your pet? What happened? Your dog is there. Let's say you have a dog, but you don't feed him. You don't give him pop. You don't give him food. You don't give him water. What happened? He dies, right? What if your parent never feeds you? What happened? Your dad never feeds you? Come on? No? No? Okay, I'm just joking. If you're not fed, you will eventually die because there's no food. Here's the thing. When God created men and women, not only He created them, not only He gave them life, He had provided everything that they needed. When God created men and women, He also planted garden for men, the trees, fruits, and every vegetation and everything, so they could eat from it. Verse 8 says, and the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there He put the man whom He had formed. So after God created Adam first, He put Adam in the Garden of Eden. And in the Garden of Eden, there were plants and trees where he could literally eat. Remember the dominion that God has given to human beings? God gave man and woman every authority and right and power to eat. Whether it's animal, fish, birds, God said, you know what? Do whatever you want. You can name them, you can rule over them, you can control them, and you can eat them. And not only that, when God put Adam in the Garden of Eden, He said, you know what? Everything that's within the garden, eat them. Eat anything and everything. This was God providing the provision, the food for Adam. Not only God has created them, but not only God has formed them, He also helped them to live and survive. How many of you ate breakfast today? Anybody had 아침 today? Did you make it? Did you prepare it yourself, or did your mom prepare for you? Your parents did, right? Do you ever eat without your parents preparing food for you? Sometime? Like, what do you eat? Ramen? Right? Yeah. Like, literally, that's it. Like, everyone else, right? Whenever our parents, do not prepare a meal for us, what do we eat? Ramen, and 짜파게티 maybe, right? And what happened? We get malnutrition, like we get 영양실조, or we get either fat or we get skinny, right? Here's the thing: not only God had, created man and woman, Adam, He also provided them food. So God was being responsible for the men and women that He had created. Here's the thing: verse 9 says this, but the tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil was there also. When God put Adam in the middle of the Garden of Eden, and when God planted, trees and grass and vegetation, not only those, He also planted the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We're like, okay, that's what God did. But here's the thing. What happened with the tree of knowledge of good and evil? What happened with 선악과 that God had put in the Garden of Eden? Did Adam and Eve just look at it and was like, oh, there's a tree? Or do they do something with it? They grabbed the fruit and they ate it, right? And what do we call that? We call that sin. We call that sin. Because God has planted the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the middle of Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve was. They saw it, they grabbed it, and they ate it, and they have sinned against God. And this brings us a question: why? Why did God put that tree in the middle of the Garden of Eden? But here's the thing. Verse 16 and 17 shows us that God had given them, Adam and Eve, the instruction of what to do. This is what it said. And the Lord God ordered the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat. For in that day, in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. What did God just tell Adam? Hey, Adam, look, you're in the Garden of Eden. In here, there's everything that you literally need. You want food? The food is there. You want water? Water is there. Whatever you name it, whatever you need, is all in here. Eat anything and everything that you want. Except one thing. Do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And what happens if you eat it? You shall not eat it, but for in that day, if you eat it, what's going to happen to him? You will die. God clearly gave him instruction, the rule. Follow my rule. Eat everything except that one tree. So God had provided this. You can do what he could do. He could eat anything and everything. But only thing that he couldn't do was this. Do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. When God made Eden 동산, when God had given them food and everything they needed, God told Adam, you know what? 다 먹어. 선악과 빼고. What happened? What happened? He ate it. He ate it. Do you think God made a mistake? I mean, we could say that if God didn't make the tree of knowledge good and evil, if God didn't make 선악과, or if God didn't plant the tree in the middle of the garden, we could say that, you know what? Maybe the sin would not have come into human beings. Maybe Adam and Eve did not, they didn't have to commit sin against God. Right? I mean, can we say that God made a mistake? Or can we blame God for Adam and Eve's sin? Can we say that this is God's fault, that they have sinned against the Lord? The question that I just mentioned right here, it points at the fact that, we can start blaming God, right? Because if God didn't make 선악과, or if He didn't put it in the middle of the garden, because you know what, Adam and Eve maybe did not find it, maybe they didn't have to eat it, maybe they weren't tempted to eat it. But because God left it there, we may say, you know what, this is God's fault. Or He made a mistake. We could say that, if God didn't make it, Adam and Eve would not have eaten it, or there would have been no temptation, or there would have been no sin from Adam, and everything would be perfect and good. No sin. But because God made it, because God planted the tree, Adam and Eve were tempted. They're 유혹받아, right? And they ate it, they have sinned, and they were kicked out from the Garden of Eden. And there was separation from God. And because Adam and Eve have sinned, the sin came into the world, and we became sinners as well too. Now, let's look at it from this perspective. Did God make mistake? Can we rightfully blame God for making mistake by planting the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the middle of the garden? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? When I first read book of Genesis, I questioned myself. Why? I questioned God. God, if you're so perfect, if you're so holy, why did you make that tree and plant it in the middle of the garden so Adam and Eve ate it and sinned against you? I put that blame, that responsibility to God. But here's the thing. The purpose of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What's its purpose? What is it? We could say that, if that didn't exist, everything would have been perfect. So we may not agree with its existence. We may say, that should not be there. Maybe God should not have put that. Or maybe God should not have created it to begin with. But here's the thing. Imagine this situation for a second. You're you guys are still a little kid. Okay? You have a younger brother. Do you have a younger brother? Do you guys have younger sister, younger brother? 7학년들? 동생 있어? 몇 살이야? 몇 학년? 1학년. Okay? Fourth grade. Okay? So, she's young, right? Imagine this for a second. She's at the kitchen. Okay? And there's cutting board and there's a knife. What do you think your mom will say? 엄마 뭐라 할 것 같아? Nothing? Your mom's like, yeah, go play with it. Grab the knife, swing it, go and stab your brother. No, right? Your mom, our parents, usually, unless they're they're normal, usually they will tell us, do not go near the knife, right? 칼 근처도 가지 마. 위험해. Or when we were younger, they were like, 지지, 안 돼, right? Why? To protect us. To protect us, right? They're not gonna let their kid grab it and swing it. Ah! They're not gonna do that. Why? Because it's dangerous. They want to warn us that that thing right there is very dangerous and it could kill you. It could hurt you, it could hurt someone, and it could literally kill you if you don't be careful with it. But do they say things nicely? Like, 만지지 마세요. Do they say things nicely like that? No. Yeah. 가까이 하지 마. 뭐 하는 거야? And this is my dad, by the way. Okay. They get angry at you because they're so desperate to protect you. They're not angry at you. They just want to be very careful. They're angry because you were in danger. Here's the thing. The purpose of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was this. God wanted to protect us. It was the purpose of protecting us from the most dangerous thing that's out there. And that thing is called sin. That thing is called sin. Do you think the sin would have never existed if the tree was never there? Do you guys literally think that Adam and Eve would never have sinned against God if there was no 선악과 in the garden? Do you think sin came only because the tree was there? Guys, whether we agree or not, the sin was there, with or without the tree. With or without the tree. Let me prove that to you guys. The sin was there, with or without the tree. How many of you, raise your hand, I want to see it. How many of you have lied to your parents because you ate the fruit from the tree? How many of you lied to your parents because somebody taught you how to lie to your parents? How many of you disobeyed your parents because somebody told you, you know what, you should never listen to your parents? Anybody? What was the reason why you lied to your parents from the beginning? What was the reason why you have disobeyed your parents when you were a little kid? Did anybody teach you? Do they teach those things at school? Like your teacher's like, hey guys, today we're going to learn how to lie to your parents. Look at their eyes and tell them, you know what? Mom, I have finished my homework. And they will trust you. Do your teachers actually do that at school? No. They teach you the opposite. They say, you know what? Never ever lie to your parents. Why? Because they're wrong. But why did we lie to our parents to begin with? Guys, it's in us. It's so natural for us to lie to our parents because we don't want to get scolded. We want to prove ourselves that we can do something without our parents. So we lie, we disobey, and we do whatever we want to do. Same thing with Adam and Eve. They had the desire. When the serpent had tempted them, you know what? If you eat that fruit, you can be as good as God. How did Adam and Eve respond? They ate it. Why? Because even though God never taught them the disobedience, they had the desire in their heart. You know what? I want to be as good as God. I want to be as smart as God. I want to be as perfect as God. I want to be like God. So they ate it. And that's the proof that sin was there with or without the tree. The tree that God had planted in the middle of the garden, it became the standard guideline for everyone. Verse 17 says, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Imagine this situation when God has spoken this to Adam. Hey, Adam, Hey, buddy. Eat anything, but you know what? Please don't eat from the tree. I beg you. Do you think this was God's tone when God was talking to Adam? No. God was very definitive. God was very 단호해 when God spoke to Adam about this. You know what? But of the tree of knowledge, good and evil, do not eat it, or you will die. Or you will die. Do you think God wanted Adam to die when he just formed it and gave him his image and gave him life? No. God never wanted to be separated from Adam and Eve. So when God gave this command from verse 17, God was very definitive. You know what? Do not eat it. Please do not eat it. I don't want you to die. I don't want you to be separated from me. I want to spend the rest of your life with me. But if you eat it, you'll be separated from me. This was God's command. If you eat it, you're disobedient and you're listening to me and you'll be fine. But if you eat it, it's called disobedience. It's called disobedience. That's called sin, and you will die. So yes, guys, the tree existed, and the purpose of the tree was to protect us. By teaching us what is sin, by teaching us what is the line that we should never cross, by giving us the guidelines, the standard of what is right and what is wrong, and by drawing the line that we should never cross. Once we cross it, we'll forever be separated from God. And because God did not want that, He has set the tree as a standard. Some may believe that because God made a mistake, that we were tempted to sin. But guys, trust me, the sin came from the desire, from our heart. That desire to be like God, the desire to sin against God, it never came from God. It will never come from God. It will always come from our heart, that we have this desire that, you know what, I don't need God. I can be God. I am the master of my life. I'm the Lord of my life. This life belongs to me. I don't need to worship God. You know, I'm wasting my Sunday time. I could play basketball. I could watch football. I could do so many things within this time. It's coming from your heart, not from God. God never told us to sin. God never tempted us to sin. And God never tested us, so whether we will sin or not against Him. Everything is from us. The sin is from us. And the tree, because God knew us, He wants to protect us from our sin by setting the standard and the guideline. So guys, if you ever have in your life, now I'm telling you, stop blaming God. Take full responsibility for your own actions and for your own sin. You sin, what do? No, you don't blame God. You sin, then you repent. You ask God for forgiveness. God, not because of you, but because I am sinner, because I am weak, I have sinned against you. Forgive my sin. You know what? It is my prayer, it is my hope that this year, all of us, even though we may not be perfect, all of us will try our best to follow God's command, not our desire. Once we start following our desire, we find a tree, we eat from it, we sin against God. But once we start listening to God, that's when we stop sinning. That's when we start listening. That's when we start obeying. So listen to God. Follow His instruction. Because that's literally all we need to hear. And that's literally all we need to know. So it is my prayer and challenge for all of us here today. Turn to God, listen to Him, and never look away, so that your sight will be set upon the Lord, not the world or sin. Let's pray.